Hi and welcome back to the channel. It's time to get over Halloween and move into other forms of cinema. In this case, in this particular episode, it's going to be Indonesian action cinema, and the king of Indonesian action cinema is, of course, Iko Uwais. And I'm doing two of his movies, probably the two most iconic movies he's made thus far. And they're very different, and they are, one's a sequel to the other. And the first one I'm going to do is The Raid from 2011, directed by Gareth Evans. It is an iconic piece of 21st century action cinema. No way it isn't. And the other one I'm going to do is Raid 2, which escalates things, takes it into a totally different area, but we'll start off with the first one. Gareth Evans is a Welsh director who has made himself pretty much a feature of Indonesian action cinema. Made a movie called Merendal, which really was successful above what was expected of it. It's an action piece of cinema. He's an action director. It's the kind of cinema that he loves. And Merendal was successful, and then he got about $1.8 million US to make a second movie, and he decided to up the ante and make The Raid. The Raid is mind-blowingly good. The premise is pretty simple. Iko Uwais plays a police rookie called Rama, who is part of a team that is sent to raid a 14-story apartment building, an old 14-story apartment building in a rundown area of Jakarta, and take out the drug gang that lives, works, and operates out of there. They get in deeper than they expect. The whole team almost gets massacred pretty quickly, and Rama has to make his way to the top of the tower and take out the bad guy. Now, this is complicated by a number of different things: corrupt cops, the organization of the drug cartel itself, and the fact that the rule of law is kind of broken down in the world of this movie, and that the police aren't necessarily going to help out a rookie who is in a dire situation. You can look at it if you want to as Die Hard in a apartment tower, but it's very much not that. It is pure balls to the wall action cinema. And I don't think at this stage there is anywhere in the world that does it better than Indonesia. They really have learned from movies from other cultures and adopted the best of them while keeping their own cultural flavor to it. And the world of The Raid sets up some things which are kind of not unique to it and have been done before, but are done very much differently. During the battles, as Rama has to make his way to the top of the tower, there are kind of specialist bad guys who have special skill sets and do things in their own particular way. There's a machete gang, which is quite vicious. There's also a guy called Mad Dog, a short guy with lank, kind of long hair, played by Yayan Ruhian, who is a master of Salat, and he is a force of nature in this movie. The fight choreography was done by Iko Uwais and Yayan Ruhian, and it is mind-blowingly good. The movie does a few things really well. It uses practical effects on some of the blood and gore incredibly well. It uses some computer effects. All of the guns were just airsoft guns rather than proper firearms, and so all of the Foley sounds for the gunfire and the bullets and the muzzle flashes were all done in post-production. But it really does give us a brutal, ugly battle. There is nothing more gory, well, not necessarily more gory, but more brutal and kind of accurate in the violence in an Indonesian action film, and The Raid really pays off on that. The guys who made it in post-production couldn't really find the right sounds they wanted, so they did a lot of the sound design and made the sounds themselves for a lot of the bullet hits and a lot of the fight punches and crunches. It gives it a very visceral kind of impact, and I use that word very much in the style of the movie. It's just mind-blowing. If you're into action cinema, this is next level stuff. This is not your ordinary Marvel Cinematic Universe punch up between an elevator full of guys and Captain America. This takes it to a crazy level. And Iko Uwais is a really interesting actor in a lot of ways. The movie sets up at the start with him waking up in the morning. You see his gun and his watch, which are two iconically important parts of the movie. He does some chin-ups and he does a whole bunch of workouts, and then he goes into the bedroom and kisses his pregnant wife and goes to work and starts the day where he's going to do the raid. So we know who this guy is. We know what's important to him. We know that he has skills. And I like that. They set up the character before any of the action starts. And there's a nice balance in this movie between suspense and just crazy action. And I like that. I like suspense in movies. I think it's harder to do in some ways than fight scenes, but it does give you, well, not relieving the tension, it gives you a different kind of tension than a full-on action scene, and I really like that. And the raid really does deliver on it. It's a definite recommend from me. If you haven't seen it, you should. If you haven't seen it for a while, you can compare and contrast with movies that were made later than this. This was made in 2011, and I think that it holds up incredibly well. And then 3 years later, Gareth Evans made Raid 2, which takes us into territory that's been covered by other filmmakers. It owes a lot to John Woo, it owes a lot to people like Takeshi Miike, it owes a lot to Beat Takeshi as well. There are influences here, and also Martin Scorsese's The Departed is probably one of the influences of this film. It starts off almost immediately after the events of the first Raid movie, and Rama and the corrupt cop he's captured and his brother get involved with it. The corrupt cop and the brother are dealt with pretty quickly, and then we find out that the police, a certain area of the police force, which is in the business of taking out bad guys in any way necessary, gets him to go undercover in a prison and become friends with the son of a crime lord, so he can kind of move his way up through the hierarchy of the crime family. That takes 2 years. He's left to hang in the prison for 2 years, and we see right at the start a really nice, tight battle inside a toilet cell in a prison. Now, one of the things Gareth Evans loves to do is corridor fights and fights in confined areas. He's very good at doing fights in broader areas and in various other locations. But in this one, it starts out with a fight in a toilet stall. It's a pretty wide toilet stall. It's somewhere between a toilet stall and a kind of mobile home sized area, but it works in the context of the movie. There's also a big riot in the prison, in the yard during a monsoon, and it's basically a mud fest. Everyone's in ankle deep mud, and the fighting in that is crazy good. There's some broken limbs, there's all sorts of other bits and pieces. It just has visceral ugliness and a visceral kind of toughness that I really appreciate. Eventually Rama is let out of prison and he goes and works for the crime boss, and while he doesn't necessarily move up the ranks, he's in a position where he can bug the crime boss's son, who looks a little bit like an Indonesian Jared Kushner, which was a really nice touch, though it wasn't deliberate because this movie of course predates Jared Kushner. But it really works. Like I said, there's a lot of John Woo in here, but it's very much its own thing. There are, of course, again, these specialist fighters. There's a guy who uses a baseball bat and a baseball as a primary weapon, and that's kind of interesting. And there's a woman played by Estelle who has wraparound sunglasses, and her weapon of choice is a pair of claw hammers. And she does pretty well in it. There's a really great fight between her and a whole bunch of Yakuza guys with tanto knives in a moving subway train, and that works really well. Now, the best bit of this movie from a filmmaking point of view is a wonderful shot where there's a car chase and a fight going on at the same time. Iko Uwais' character Rama is in the backseat of a car having a battle with all of the other guys in the car, and in the meantime they're taking part in a car chase with a guy in a car behind them, and the camera moves out of one car down the road and into another car in a single shot, and it's brilliantly done. You can find the footage of how that was done on YouTube, but again it shows the way the filmmakers who don't have the resources of a Hollywood studio can still make incredibly visceral and incredibly mind-blowingly good action films. Oh yeah, the battles in this one are escalated beyond what were in the first movie, and the number of locations in which they take place are increased. It's quite easy to lose track of the various different factions in the crime families. There's a Yakuza family called the Goto family. There's another group of guys. There's a third group. There's a fourth group. The layering of the crime hierarchy in this movie is pretty intense, and you don't really need to follow it to just kind of go with this guy's against this guy, but this guy's had an alliance with this guy. It really does have a kind of lived-in world about it, and above that there is the politics and the corrupt politics that allow all of this stuff to happen. And Iko Uwais fights his way through things until he gets to the big bad and takes them out, as we expect that to happen. And then there is a very ambiguous ending where we see Rama just standing in front of a bunch of guys, and we don't quite know where it's going to go right at the end, and that's fine. I don't mind it leaving on an ambiguous note because the ride has been so good. There's also an incredibly vicious battle with a guy who carries two karambits. Now, if you don't know what a karambit is, it's an Indonesian knife. It was originally an agricultural implement, and it was then weaponized of necessity during various conflicts centuries ago. And this is it. That's a little karambit, and you put your thumb through that and you can do that. And also, just for another demonstration, I have a slightly bigger one. Now you can carry it that way, you can carry it that way. They're a vicious little weapon, and the ones used in the movie are even larger than these ones. I'm just going to put them away now before I cut myself off screen. That's better, and no, I didn't cut myself. And they are a vicious weapon. They're also an Indonesian weapon. They were invented in Indonesia as a threshing implement. They were used to cut down grain stalks, to dig roots out of the ground, and other various agricultural things, and then became weaponized. And you see them used in some very effective and very brutal ways in the raid too. It's really not a movie for the squeamish, but as far as action cinema goes, it's the best of the best. You're really going to have to give this one a go because it simply works. Now, there are other Indonesian action films you should check out. There's another Iko Uwais movie called Headshot, which I like. There's also one which was recommended to me when I did the Gundala episode of the channel, which is called The Night Comes For Us. And it stars Joe Taslim and also Iko Uwais. Joe Taslim was in the first Raid movie, and he is a star in so many ways. As an actor, he's really fine. As an action star, he's really fine. Apparently, he's a judo guy, and so he's got a martial arts background as well. And I recommend The Night Comes For Us. I watched it on some streaming service. It might have been Netflix, it might have been Amazon. And it really does give us more of that complex underworld kind of feel, with some very good specialist fighters, and that does seem to be a theme in Indonesian action cinema. You get really adept fighters who have a specialization, whether it be a aluminium baseball bat and a ball or a couple of claw hammers. They just come at the hero with some at times quite unusual weapons, and I really like that. So just to finalize this, you should check out the Raid 1 and 2, you should check out Merendal, you should check out Headshot, you should check out The Night Comes For Us. All of them really work well as action movies, and if you're in the mood for that, avoid that Chuck Norris crap and go for the good stuff. And the good stuff is definitely coming out of the archipelago up to the top left-hand corner of Australia. Indonesia is punching well above its weight in cinema these days, and I really appreciate what they're doing to keep me entertained during the lockdown. And by the way, my lockdown is ending soon. Hopefully this weekend I can travel anywhere across Victoria. I went to a cafe. The lockdown for coronavirus has been crazily effective here. We've had 4 days of no new infections in the state of Victoria where I live, and Australia yesterday had no new infections at all. So lockdowns definitely work. If you're in another part of the world, my heart goes out to you. I hope you guys get governments that do the right thing by you and protect you and enable you to look after the people you love and yourselves during this horrible time. But on an up note, check out some good kick-ass Indonesian cinema while you're locked down. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. As usual, like, subscribe and comment. Tell me if there's some movies I missed in Indonesian action cinema, because I'm always interested in that. And also, if you want to, you can support the channel for as little as $1 US per month by going to patreon.com/paleocinema. So look after yourselves, wear a mask, follow the science, watch some great Indonesian action cinema, and I'll catch you next time.